Hi, I'm Greg Padelacki, the CEO of Alterman Electric, and I'm here with Mr. Richard Alterman to talk about the history of Alterman. So Dick, welcome to the conversation.
Well, it's enjoyable. I've been looking forward to this, to talk about the company. I'm almost as old as the company. I'm close to it. And so there's a lot of history that I do remember, and be happy to go over it with you.
Yeah, I started thinking about, I know how old you are, so I was doing some math earlier. So company founded 1923, what year were you born?
I'm born in 29. I'm 94.
Okay. So you were a young, you were born when your dad was just a few years into the business.
And as a kid, I used to ride on the gut wagon truck with the electricians before World War II and during the war. And some of the things we did and saw and that we did then we couldn't do now because they didn't exist now. Not many of them existed then.
What's some of your early memories?
Well, I remember first old Dad talking about when he first went into trade, and he said that they used to drive. They took their tools and their ladders and everything. They rode in the trolley cars. Went to the job in the trolley car. That would have been in if he was 17, 18 years old, would have been in about those years, just the beginning of World War II. And you didn't go in a truck because you didn't own one. And Dad bought the company in 23. He had a friend who had actually, it was a repair shop, not a contractor. And Dad was in business. They went through some things in the 30s. He had formed Alterman Electric. Guy Coode was a big deal in the Masons here, and Dad thought, well, maybe they get the guy Coode, that they'd get a lot of business. And unfortunately, it went the other way, and the company went out of business, but they were on South Florida Street across from the courthouse, and they moved over on Commerce where we were until 65. But Dad went back in business with $300 he borrowed from his father-in-law. And one of the guys said everything we could steal out of the old place, we were able to get a little material, and that's what we went into business with in 33.
Wow.
And now you look at the company today, and it's there's just no comparison. It's
yeah. Well, I try to imagine 1933. What did San Antonio look like in 33?
Well, San Antonio was at most 6 miles square, and people often don't believe it, but Hildebrand was the north city limits, and Hildebrand now is downtown.
Yeah, it is.
But that was the north city limits of San Antonio. When I was in high school, I guess it may even have been less than that. But they did a little bit of everything. As you and I were talking earlier, they did a lot of residential work. Then somebody said, why do they do so many residential jobs? I said, well, that was simple. That's all it was around.
Yeah.
And they later got into the commercial business. And Dad used to walk when we were down just by where the Marriott River Center is now. He would go from there to the marketplace twice a day. He'd walk up, and then as he got older, he went to the courthouse, and then it was once a day. But Dad always came back with a repair job or somebody needed a light installed or plugged. And in the 30s, I doubt that most of these people who are working for the company now have ever seen anything other than a full paycheck.
Yeah.
But in the 30s, full paychecks didn't happen. And Dad came back, the phone rang, and somebody wanted to plug. There was plenty of people available to go do it because that just added an extra couple hours for that week. There was always somebody available. But the company grew, and I guess Dad got to where he was known as the mayor of Houston Street, because he knew all the stores and all the people on Houston Street. And when somebody would come to town, it's kind of like it is today. They want to know, who do we call? They said, oh, call Alterman Electric. Well, if they had 3 bidders, Alterman Electric was always one of them. And today, I think you do the same thing. When somebody comes to town and needs something special, that's just a continuation of what happened back in those days.
Mhm.
We've always looked for the ability to be different, better, and
Mhm.
to do things that other people couldn't do, and made sure they knew we were better. And safety was always something we talked about. We were fortunate over the years to never, in my career, to have a serious accident. But those things are started way, way, way back. And the thing that's interesting to me is to see today that you do the same thing, only you do it a lot bigger and a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot better because it's a lot more organized. But the same things are talked about.
The same principles apply.
Same principles apply. It's
it's interesting looking back, starting a company in the mid-20s and then living through the Great Depression and expecting to prosper. At the time, you probably didn't know how bad it was. Maybe you did. But it had to be really challenging to make it through, like 31, 32, 33, those times. It couldn't have been prosperous. It had to be tough, real tough.
Well, I suspect that it's just as challenging today because the problems are different, but they're just as big and just as important and just as difficult to solve because the laws are different, the people are different, everything about it is different.
Yeah.
Well, I've got one thing that I thought about, Greg. People have talked about the fact that we did the original river project downtown, and it was nothing special. It was another job, and I remember going down as a kid with Dad, seeing the guys and waiters, and they were working. But that wasn't so much of a deal other than the fact that we were involved in it. But we did a job there, I guess it was maybe 40 years later. It was a rehab of the river. And we got the job. How we got it, I bid it or whatever, didn't make it. But we had something not many people remember. We had the Alterman Navy.
What's that?
How do you do the work under the bridges and all? Well, a lot of times you hung a scaffold over the side, but you had to keep moving the scaffold. Somebody came up with an idea and got it was either a flat bottom boat or barge. Right. We had a little 3-horse kicker. I think it was about that big. It hung in the tool room for years after. We put that kicker on that little barge, and I don't know if we had a scaffold or a ladder, but we could go onto the bridge and do the work and go to the next one. It was a lot better than hanging scaffolds on it. But I call that USS Alterman 1.
There you go. When you think back on some of those projects, the history of San Antonio and the history of Alterman really, they go in parallel with each other. Back then, like you said, you didn't probably think too much of doing the electrical work on the Riverwalk, but it's a significant, thing for the city. And it's really neat to be able to say that Alterman was part of that. And even some of the other downtown projects too.
Well, we did almost all of the shoe stores and little dress stores along Houston Street. And say people come to town and ask, who should we call? And he says, there's another contractor in town. Everybody tells us Alterman. Go to the supply house. It's always been a situation. We were a little better and a little better known because we did the job. And, you do those jobs in 30, 60 days. And that was a lot of work to be done. And those $6,000, $8,000 job was a big job.
Yeah. How many employees did we have back in those days? I mean, whatever.
Well, when I got out of school in 54, I don't remember when I got out of college, out of school, we had 3 electricians. And it grew. And finally, I don't know, it just kept growing. I can't tell you when, but in the middle, I guess, 70s, we did UTSA, and I guess during the hemisphere, we probably had 100 electricians. But we, in the 70s, when we did UTSA and a remodel of the federal building and some things like that, we were up to 300 or 400 employees. Then it dropped back, and we went through some tough times after that. All the jobs we had weren't good. They weren't, unfortunately, weren't money makers. But I recall at the end of it, we had about 150 people, it seemed.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat down with Carol Fisher, Gary Breeden, and Jerry, and various people that were there. And we said that if we could do the job and if we could continue what we were doing, we'd build up. And if we could keep 60, 70 people busy, we could all make a nice living.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was told about that many times, and we never got below about 150.
Mm-hmm.
But
I've heard that story that happened somewhere in the early 80s, I guess.
well, it was actually in the middle, it was the late 70s.
Okay.
And then as we got into the early 80s, and we were roaring pretty good in those days. It was a different time. There were some tough times, but we were rolling pretty good in those days. But we never got below 150 people, I don't think.
Right. There's a lot of legacy for us to protect and continue with. And
well, I've seen several things. You got the Alterman University, which it's very interesting that you further the education of people. You grew out of something similar to that, apparently, in the company that the Alterman University. You did. You went to something that
LTP, the leadership training program.
But I said they've got to sign them. Yeah. You got the foundation. You've got several things that are side projects. Mm-hmm. The money is spent not just for the company; it's spent. You're doing something for the community as well, and it brings you in front of the community in a very, very positive way.
Yeah, it's important.
You know, you wonder what are people going to think of me when I'm gone, and I see people whose names kind of disappear, and I'm proud of the fact that I can look and see Alterman in the company.
Yeah.
And what I have seen done has been positive, and it doesn't make me look bad. It does only makes me look good, and it's a memorial to my father and to me to see that the company has been and grown and as a kind of company. If we could have envisioned it, this is what we would have envisioned. It's beyond our wildest dreams.
Yeah. We appreciate you saying that because it's extremely important to everybody that works at the
company.
We
talk about it. You know, we're proud of what we've got. We never expected to be here this long, but to be able to see, it blows my mind when you talk about how big the company has gotten. Because I didn't know there was that much electric work in the world.
Are that many electricians out there?
Well. You know, when we talk about they started out riding the trolley car.
Yeah.
And there's just so much that has taken place. The world, it's a different world. I mean, you know, it's not just what happened 30 years ago or 40 years ago. It's what happened yesterday. Somebody asked me, I want to buy the latest computer. When should I buy it? I said, tomorrow. They said, oh, what's going to happen? I said, I don't know, but tomorrow's going to be different than today.
Yeah.
And it's growing, and the company's growing. The company has adapted to the times, and I've had people tell me they see my trucks. Well, they're not my trucks. It's my name, and I'm proud of the fact that it's there, and people talk to me about it.
Well, if we all do our jobs right, Dick, you'll see your name will be out there forever. Because I mean, the company is built to last that long, so we got to keep up the legacy for sure.
It's important to us.
Yeah. Well, Dick, I want to thank you for coming here today with us. This is a special occasion here at Alterman, and we're super proud and excited to continue with the legacy that you and your family have started here. Hopefully, we can do your name well many, many years into the future. So,
well, Greg, I want to thank you. It's been a very, very enjoyable afternoon for me. I've gotten to know you a little better, but to be able to talk about the company and think back at the things that have happened and where I spent the early part of my life and I was able to spend later years as a result of the company, I appreciate it. And I'm thrilled to death to see what the company has done. And it makes me very proud to see it. it's nice to know the legacy that my father started and we were able to carry on is the legacy of Alterman. And I hope that somebody is here, maybe not 100 years from now. That's in this day and age, I hope somebody's here in 20, 30 years. But it's been very enjoyable, and thank you for the afternoon.
Yep. Thanks for being here. Mm-hmm.